Jimmy, I gotta take a dump.
What?
No, I mean I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP. The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
That
is true. That is true.
He's worried about whether or not The Undertaker would get over. It was all in the presentation. If something is written well and it suits the characters, then it's going to be good. I'm sure even Sharky will agree. If something's good, it's good.
Well, here's what Sharky says. He says he hopes Vince isn't the higher power of the Wyatt family. I kind of would dig that. That would be pretty cool.
I would love that, but that's me. You know, it was me. It was me all along.
Here's a good comment from someone, Indian Potato. Do you think the WWE will relaunch WCW? Because I feel like this Vice WCW documentary is an open platform. Plus, Conrad asked Eric on his show of this question, and Eric just paused.
They have two brands. They have Raw and SmackDown. Why would they create another one? You know, I don't see the point in it. I really don't. Raw and SmackDown are two different entities, and they join together at WrestleMania, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. WCW... Well, it would remind me of when they rebooted ECW. It's not going to be the same. People are going to compare it, blah, 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 blah. Hey, if you want to see a really crappy version of WCW, tune into AEW on Wednesday nights.
Wow. Bang. With a exclamation point. This week on WCW, What Killed WCW, they went into Bischoff and Russo. And, you know, we covered who we thought. You gave your percentages you thought last week. But this is what this is what Vince Russo said on the show, and I really need you to weigh in. I was a better on-air character than 80% of the WCW roster. WCW has become a popular topic lately with the release of Vice's Who Killed WCW docuseries. This week's episode was titled New Blood, featuring none other than Vince Russo. Many fans, some of the veterans who worked with Russo at WCW, often blame him for the company's fall in quality, and according to the man himself, this wasn't the case. I'm just going to be the 1,000% completely honest with you. As far as an on-air character, I felt I was better than 80% of the roster. Russo boldly claimed, the criticism Russo faces is often due to him booking himself onto his show and putting the WCW world title around his waist. However, he explained that happened on the receiving end of a ton of pressure. I made the mistake of saying, you know what? Fuck it. If you want ratings, I'll go out there and get ratings myself. I almost got killed, bro. I almost got killed. Russo pointed out that Goldberg was trying to purposely hurt him on the show. Weigh in on your remembrance of Vince Russo, WCW, and eventually the demise of WCW.
Yeah, it's funny. Vince Russo says that he was better than 80% of the roster, and he wonders why the locker room probably has no regard for him to this day. It's almost like a guy that you ever play that basketball game, Horse?
Yeah.
Okay, and you got a guy with one shot. Russo, if he was playing Horse, would just keep shooting from the free throw line because it's the game that suits him. So he builds a whole program written around his Crash TV failure shit and then makes himself the star of it. Of course, he's going to have more on-air time and more, getting over because he's putting himself over. It was one of the worst things I've ever seen in the history of television was when Vince Russo decided to put the belt on himself. It was the laughing stock. And as far as Goldberg hurting him, I find that hilarious. What does that tell you about how the wrestlers must have felt about Vince Russo, the person behind the scenes? Goldberg is not even a lifer, has never, proclaimed a love for professional wrestling. You know what I mean? He's not a Bret Hart, and he's out there trying to kill Russo. What does that tell you? It tells me quite a lot. It tells me Goldberg had no regard for him, and Goldberg is even protecting the business when it comes to a guy like Russo.
Well, that's
I'm going to
crazy.
run you through. Think about that. That to me is insane.
That's funny.
I mean, man, you must be really disliked in the back, bro. I mean,
but like, here's my question. We talked about Nash last week, like not taking ownership, right? And I'm thinking to myself, Russo the whole time is defending his time in WCW. Isn't it all about results? And at some point, like, look, Bischoff did a great job. He got them. They were competing, but eventually he couldn't sustain it, and he failed. Right. And I almost think Bischoff kind of accepts the fact that Vince McMahon was the better promoter. End of story. Right. No matter how it cut and dry, it's the end result. Russo, on the other hand, he just won't admit it. Like, look, dude, why wouldn't Russo say, you know what? I was really good at my job, but you know what the problem was? I didn't have a Vince McMahon controlling me. If I would have had a Vince McMahon at WCW, I would have been successful. And unfortunately, I felt that I had no one on my side because he talked about Sullivan not being on his side. He talked about, he basically was blaming Kevin Sullivan for part of WCW's problems. And, I think Sullivan's been somewhat successful, right? I would consider Sullivan one of the great bookers of all time.
Russo is the reason why they sank in the end. Russo could not help them one bit. Do you realize how much torture Bischoff had to go through? I've thought about this often. Bischoff had to team up with him. Bischoff took the check, and I'm sure Bischoff would be the first to tell you, look, I got offered money to come back. But he must have been sickened by the thought of having to share anything with Vince Russo, because it didn't work out. They did not get along, obviously. History says so. What does it tell you when Bischoff, and even more importantly, a guy like Jim Cornette, he couldn't stand him. Jim Cornette is a lifer. The guy, whether you love him or hate him, that guy knows his wrestling, and he couldn't stand the sight of Russo being involved in booking.
Well,
because Russo was about soap operas. That's it. It was all soap operas and crash television for Russo. And when he had Vince, it was under control. And when he didn't, the proof's in the pudding. What happened, happened.
Let's talk about Russo, the person. Again, we don't know him, but let's be fair about this. Russo, from what we've learned about him from the many guests that we've had on, is an opportunist, right?
Right.
Who's the guy, your friend? Arezzi. He took it, he met a Resi, saw an opportunity to be able to get involved in something with wrestling. Because, again, I found out that, did you know Russo actually tried out at the Johnny Rod School of Wrestling? I wish I would have asked Johnny about that. I wonder if Johnny even remembers him. But, so the guy wanted to be a wrestler. So he meets a Resi. He somehow weasels his way into a Resi. And then somehow, with the use of working off of a Resi, he gets into the WWE writing the magazine, right? He had a journalist degree, right? Okay.
Right.
Opportunist. Now, there's plenty of opportunists in life, but again, I think there's a difference between being an opportunist and having actual talent. Right. I don't really believe he had a lot of talent, dude. I believe that he saw Jerry Springer and he said, let's make WWE Jerry Springer because it's the hot thing. And it didn't translate when he went to WCW because Jerry Springer, in last week's episode, he explains that Jerry Springer was hot. It wasn't hot when he went over there. It was dying at that point. It was hot during the Attitude Era.
Agreed. Again, if it wasn't for Vince McMahon reeling him in, the WCW might have wound up winning the war. One of the best things that ever happened was Vince Russo leaving. We took off after Vince Russo left. I mean, WWE took off and wound up buying WCW. Look, he can rewrite history all he wants, but history's already spoken.
That's a great comment, Jimmy. That's the facts, right? The facts are already in the books. It's spoken. You lost. So you can't defend it. You lost. You failed. In the end result, there's an F on your report card, Vince Russo. Be man enough to say, I failed. Everybody could give reasons why they fail. Oh, I didn't get support from the president of my company. Oh, I didn't have enough funds to do this. That happens all the time. It's the end result. If you fail, you fail. He failed. In the end result, Eric Bischoff, for the first 2 quarters of high school, got A's. The second half, he failed.
Right. I'll tell you what, as a wrestling purist, I have to say this too. in defense of the 80% of the roster that he thinks he was better than. If you examine back in those days, the guys at the bottom of the card, what kind of ego are we talking about where he feels that he has more talent? Now, it gets back to talent, right, Mike? We're talking about talent. He's going to say with a straight face that he had more talent than the bottom of the card guys like, oh, I don't know, Juventud Guerrera? You have more talent than Juventud Guerrera? Have you ever watched Juventud Guerrera wrestle back in the day? He was one of the guys that built the cruiserweight division, okay? I mean, he has more historical importance to what he contributed as a performer than Vince Russo's 5 minutes of putting the belt around himself and the ratings tanking and the company closing.
Hey, Jimmy.
I find that insulting as a purist.
Jimmy, you're 100% right. But here's the deal: like Vince Russo won't come on this show, right? But he'll watch and he'll say whatever he's got to say, like the rest of them, right? So here's the thing, Russo: when you go on, why don't you on your next show be honest and because Indian Potato is a good point. Why don't you tell the people how many scripts Vince McMahon threw back in your face and said, no way we're going with that? How about you give those percentages? Because I bet you they're high. And that's a great comment, Indian Potato. How many do you think that Vince McMahon said, we're not running this shit, it's garbage?
Right. Agreed.
I mean, that's all he talks about is his wins. Oh, I did this, I did that. How about the shit they got thrown back at in your face?
Right. Well, he's keeping his brand value up by ignoring all that other stuff, just like most people do.
Let me ask you this question, and you probably know better than me. Was Russo still in the WWE when Owen Hart fell to his death?
That's May of '99. Oh, when did he leave? Did he leave at the end of '99?
I'm not sure. If anyone knows.
I can't answer that. Yeah, I know it was the same year. Pretty sure it was the same year. He might have left a little bit after that, but then again, you know what? I've never heard him talk about. Has he ever talked about it?
I think he has. I think he said it was disgrace that they didn't end that show, which many people have said. But we've also heard wrestlers say, you don't know what it was like if you weren't in the fire. But my question is, he left in like late September, R.J. Hudson says. So I'm going to assume that Vince Russo was there, and I'm going to assume that Vince – oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Roddy Piper on TNA did a shoot thing with Russo, blaming him for the death of – you know what? I'm so stupid. He did blame him. It was obviously a work, but he blamed him. But why doesn't Vince Russo take responsibility for that? Because clearly he was writing the scripts. Didn't he do the Blue Blazer thing? I
don't know. Well, it's much more fashionable to just blame everything that's started since Adam and Eve bit the apple on Vince. So you might as well just blame Vince.
All right, Jimmy, we got 2 minutes here, but then we got to get ready for the main show with the great,